They've taken your children. Your marriage is over. Those were the words that lit the fuse to my entire life. And if you want to hear how I turned betrayal into revenge, make sure you subscribe now, because this is just the beginning of a story they never wanted told. I was folding laundry, surrounded by the scent of fabric softener and the sound of my own steady breathing, when my phone buzzed against the wooden nightstand. At first, it was just another vibration in a day full of them. But when I picked it up, the preview text on the screen stopped me cold. My pulse quickened. The message was from my mother-in-law, and it said, "Your marriage is over. I've taken the kids to our family home." The words blurred as I read them again and again, hoping they would somehow change. My knees weakened, and I clutched the dresser to stay upright. My children, my babies, gone. Taken from me like they were possessions to be passed around. The laundry slipped from my hands, forgotten on the floor, as a hollow ache spread through my chest. A tremor ran through me as I dialed my husband's number. Straight to voicemail. Again and again. No answer. So I called her. My hands shook, but my voice was steadier than I expected when she finally picked up. "Where are my children?" I demanded. Her voice was calm, almost triumphant. "They belong with their family. Not in that house with you." A blade twisting inside my chest. Not in that house with me. I tightened my grip on the phone until my knuckles whitened. "You won't be able to keep them," I said coldly. The silence on the other end was deafening. She hadn't expected defiance. She had expected me to beg, to cry, to plead. But I ended the call. I would not give her the satisfaction of my fear. The house felt emptier than it ever had. The silence was suffocating without the sound of laughter, of footsteps, of tiny voices. I sank into a chair, my laptop in front of me. My mind was a storm of grief and rage, but beneath it, a clarity began to take form. She thought she had won. She thought I would break. She had no idea who I really was. I opened browser tabs, custody laws, emergency hearings, legal strategies. I wasn't going to sit here paralyzed. I wasn't just going to take my children back, I was going to make sure she never held this kind of power over me again. She had played her hand. Now it was my turn. As the dim glow of the laptop lit the room, memories from the past came rushing back. The warning signs had always been there. Her smile that never reached her eyes. The way she inserted herself into every decision, from the food I cooked to the clothes I dressed my children in. She had never truly accepted me, and my husband, he had let it happen. Every little betrayal had built up to this. And now, the mask was off. A notification pinged, breaking my thoughts. An email, from my husband. My heart pounded as I opened it. "We need to talk. I know you're upset, but this is what's best for everyone. The kids will be happier with my mother for now. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." My fingers curled into fists. Happier with her. Best for everyone. He was treating this like a business arrangement, as though my children were assets to be transferred. He had planned this. He and his mother had waited until he was away to strike. I stood, catching my reflection in the mirror. My eyes burned, but not from tears. From fury. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't devastation. This was clarity. For years, I had believed that if I tried hard enough, if I loved deeply enough, I could hold our marriage together. That if I pleased his family, if I bent and yielded, would finally be accepted. But no more. I dialed a number I hadn't called in over a year. My best friend's voice answered, cautious but steady. "I was wondering when you'd call." "I need your help," I said, my voice breaking for the first time that night. "What happened?" "They took my kids," I whispered. "His mother. And he He let it happen. The silence stretched, heavy. Then her voice sharpened, filled with a resolve I had forgotten she carried. Then we don't react emotionally. We get strategic. They think they've cornered you. They don't realize you're stronger now. Her words cut through me, grounding me. She was right. This wasn't about panic. This was about strategy. I couldn't afford rash moves. I had to know exactly what I was up against. That night, I turned back to my laptop. But not just to study custody laws. I opened our financial records. If he was willing to take my children, what else had he been hiding? Line by line, transaction by transaction, I searched. The numbers told a story he never meant for me to read. Transfers, small at first, growing larger over months. All leading to an account I didn't recognize. My chest tightened. He had been preparing for this. Cutting me out long before I knew what was coming. I grabbed my phone again and called the financial advisor we had once both trusted. His answer confirmed my worst suspicion. My husband had been moving money for months, restructuring assets, creating a future where I had no part. I ended the call, cold fury burning through me. He had underestimated me. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I wouldn't fight back. I stared at his email again. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. A slow, cold smile tugged at my lips. He had no idea what difficult looked like. I typed an urgent email to a highly recommended attorney. I need immediate assistance with an unauthorized custody change and financial discrepancies. My hands shook as I pressed send. This was the first move in a battle that would reshape everything. As I sat there, the glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes, another notification appeared. Another email from him. The kids are already adjusting. My mother is providing them with stability. Please don't escalate this. I exhaled slowly, rage boiling beneath my calm. Don't escalate. He had taken everything and wanted me quiet. No. The game had just begun. And as the night stretched on, I realized something undeniable. They had tried to erase me. But instead, they had awakened someone they couldn't control. Tomorrow, I would walk into a lawyer's office. And that would be the first step in a war they could never win. The morning sun crept through my curtains, harsh and uninvited. I hadn't slept. My laptop screen had burned into my eyes all night, its glow becoming both my enemy and my shield. The clock read 6:32 a.m. when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't him. It was the attorney I had emailed in the early hours. His voice was steady, professional, and calm. Bring every document you can. Financial records. Communication logs. Anything that proves what they've done. Meet me in my office at 10. I stared at the piles of papers scattered across my table. Bank statements, receipts, school reports, text screenshots. Evidence. My heart pounded as I stuffed everything into a folder. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From resolve. They thought I would fall apart. They thought I'd curl up, defeated. But I was going to walk into that office armed. The drive was a blur. Every stoplight felt like a test of patience, every minute another chance for doubt to creep in. What if the law wasn't on my side? What if money, influence, and manipulation outweighed the truth? I shoved the thought away. I couldn't afford hesitation. When I walked into the attorney's office, he greeted me with a firm handshake. I'm Daniel Price, he said. His eyes were sharp but kind, the kind of eyes that could both comfort and dissect a case at the same time. I slid the thick folder across his desk, my voice catching as I explained. They took my children without warning. He was in on it. And now I'm finding missing money. Daniel listened intently, scribbling notes, nodding at key points. His silence was not passive, it was calculated. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "You have a case. A strong one. They had no legal right to remove your children without a court order or your consent. That alone is grounds for an emergency custody petition. And the financial transfers? If we dig deeper, that could expose him to far more than a custody battle." His words felt like water on scorched earth. I hadn't realized how parched I was for validation until then. Relief mingled with fear. "So what happens next?" I asked. "First," he said, "we file an emergency petition to bring your children back to you. Second, we start investigating the financial records. If he's been diverting assets, there will be a paper trail. He's underestimated you. That's his mistake." I swallowed hard. "How long will it take?" "Custody cases can be drawn out," he admitted, "but emergency hearings move quickly. Days, not weeks. As for the finances, that's more complex. But you're not walking into this alone. We'll be prepared." I nodded, my resolve hardening. For the first time since that devastating message, I felt like I had a weapon in my hands. When I left Daniel's office, the city looked different. The noise of traffic, the chatter of people on the sidewalks, all of it felt muted, distant. I wasn't the same woman who had entered. I had a strategy now. A path forward. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had sharpened into something useful, determination. At home, the emptiness hit me again. The toys scattered on the floor, the half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, the small shoes lined up by the door. Ghosts of a life interrupted. I picked up my daughter's favorite stuffed rabbit and pressed it to my chest. For a moment, my knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, clutching it like it could tether me to sanity. But I forced myself back up. Grief could wait. Action could not. I called my best friend again. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. "He thinks we can win," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in days. "He's filing the petition." "That's good," she said. Then, after a pause, "But you know they won't go down quietly." I knew. I had lived in the shadow of my mother-in-law's manipulations for years. She was a master of appearances, of twisting the truth to fit her narrative. And my husband, no, I had to stop calling him that, even in my head, he was her willing pawn. They would fight dirty. I had no doubt. That night, the silence of the house was broken only by the sound of my typing. I documented everything. Every email, every message, every bank transfer. If they wanted to lie, I would bury them in proof. I backed up files to drives, printed hard copies, sealed them in envelopes. They would not erase me. By midnight, exhaustion threatened to drag me under. But before I shut my laptop, another message arrived. This time, it wasn't from him. It was from her. "You're making a fool of yourself. They belong with us. Stop fighting, or you'll regret it." I stared at the words, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to scream, to type back every ounce of venom boiling inside me. But I stopped. No. She wanted me reactive. Emotional. Unstable. Instead, I saved the message, screenshot it, and added it to my growing pile of evidence. I closed my laptop and stood in the dim light of the kitchen, my reflection in the window looking back at me. I barely recognized her, the woman who had spent years shrinking herself to fit into their mold. She was gone. What remained was sharper, harder, unbreakable. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel. "We got the court date. Next week. Be ready." The word sent a surge of adrenaline through me. This was it. The beginning of the fight for my children. the beginning of their downfall. But as I set my phone down, a shiver ran through me. They wouldn't let this happen without a counterstrike. They would come at me with everything they had. Lies. Manipulations. Smears. I needed to be ready for war. And war was exactly what I intended to give them. The days leading up to the hearing were a blur of paperwork, sleepless nights, and a constant hum of anxiety in my chest. I spent hours with Daniel in his office, combing through every detail of my life. Texts, emails, photos of my children at home with me. He wanted everything. They will try to paint you as unstable, he warned. They'll claim you're unfit, that your children need the stability of their grandmother's house. We need to be ready. The words stung because I knew they were true. That was exactly the narrative my mother-in-law had been rehearsing for years, every time she undermined me at family dinners or whispered behind my back at holiday gatherings. She had been laying the groundwork for this moment long before it came. But what she didn't realize was that I had been collecting memories too, memories that now doubled as evidence. Doctors' notes, teachers' reports, the quiet testimony of people who had seen the truth of our family. I wasn't going into this hearing defenseless. The night before court, I stood in my children's rooms. Their toys still lay where they had left them. My son's favorite dinosaur sat on the dresser, my daughter's ballet shoes hung on the door. I ran my fingers over them as if by touching them I could hold on to the pieces of their lives that had been stolen from me. "I'll bring you home," I whispered. "I promise." Morning came too quickly. My best friend drove me to the courthouse. I was grateful for her presence. Her steady hand on my arm kept me from trembling as we walked up the marble steps. Inside, the walls seemed too tall, the ceilings too high. A place built to intimidate. And there they were, my husband and his mother, already seated with their attorney. She looked smug, as if she'd already won. He avoided my eyes, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the sight of them together made my stomach twist. But I straightened my spine. They wanted me small. I refused. When the judge entered, the room stilled. My heart pounded as the proceedings began. Their lawyer spoke first, his words polished and cold. "Your Honor, the children have been with their grandmother for weeks. They are adjusting well. Our client believes that returning them to the petitioner at this time would be disruptive and not in their best interests. The petitioner has shown emotional volatility, and we question her capacity to provide a stable home environment." Volatile. My nails dug into my palms. They were turning my grief, my desperation, into a weapon against me. I forced myself to stay calm, to breathe. This was what Daniel had prepared me for. He rose smoothly from his chair. "Your Honor, the children were removed without consent or a court order. That alone is a violation of the petitioner's rights. Furthermore, we have documentation, school records, pediatrician statements, testimony from neighbors, that prove she is a dedicated and stable parent. The claims of volatility are nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to justify an unlawful act." The judge's gaze moved to me. "Mrs. Hale, do you wish to speak?" I stood, my legs shaking but my voice firm. "Yes, Your Honor." I told the truth. About the night I received the message. About how I found their rooms empty. About the years of small cruelties and manipulations, the way I had been pushed aside in my own family. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them that image. Instead, I let my resolve shine through. I love my children. I have always put them first. And I will fight for them until my last breath. The courtroom was silent when I sat back down. My mother-in-law's smirk had faltered, just slightly. My husband's eyes flicked to me, and for the first time, I saw something there that unsettled me. Not guilt. Not remorse. Calculation. The judge's expression was unreadable as the hearing continued. Hours passed in a blur of arguments, documents passed back and forth, objections and counterarguments. I felt like I was standing in the center of a storm, but I didn't break. Not once. Finally, the judge spoke. I will take this under advisement and issue a decision within 48 hours. Until then, temporary custody will revert to the petitioner. The words slammed into me like a wave. Temporary custody. It wasn't final, but it was something. My children were coming home. I almost collapsed from the weight of relief, but I held my composure. Across the room, my mother-in-law's face drained of color. My husband leaned back, his jaw clenched tight. We filed out of the courtroom, the marble floor echoing under our steps. My best friend squeezed my hand, whispering, "You did it. You really did it." But even in that moment, I knew the battle wasn't over. The look in his eyes had told me everything. He wasn't done. Neither was she. That night, I brought my children home. Their little arms wrapped around my neck, their voices crying, "Mommy," as if no time had passed. I held them close, breathing them in, fighting the tears I had held back for so long. But even in the joy, there was a shadow. Because I knew they had heard things. Lies whispered into their ears. Doubts planted like seeds. As I tucked them into bed, my son looked up at me, his voice small. "Grandma said you didn't want us anymore. Is that true?" My heart cracked. I brushed his hair back gently. "No, sweetheart. That's not true. I never stopped wanting you. I never will." He seemed to think about that, his little brow furrowing before he nodded. But I saw the confusion in his eyes. The damage had been done. Undoing it would take time. Later, after they were asleep, I sat in the darkened living room, the silence pressing in. My phone buzzed. A message from him. "You're making a mistake. This will only get harder." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with fury. Mistake. He had orchestrated this, stolen my children, undermined me at every turn. And now he wanted me to believe I was the one in the wrong. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because deep down, I knew what he didn't. I wasn't just fighting for custody anymore. I was preparing to expose him. To tear down the carefully built empire of lies he had hidden behind. The clock ticked past midnight, the house still around me. I leaned back, my resolve hardening into something sharper than steel. Tomorrow, the decision would come. And when it did, they would see just how far I was willing to go. Because I wasn't only fighting to reclaim my children. I was fighting to destroy the illusion that they had ever truly controlled me. And I wasn't done yet. The decision came faster than I expected. 2 days after the hearing, my phone buzzed with an email from Daniel. My breath caught as I opened it. The word swam before my eyes, custody restored to the petitioner. Permanent until further hearing. Children to remain with mother. I sank onto the couch, the relief so overwhelming it felt like my bones had turned to water. My children were safe. At least for now. I read the lines again, needing to see them twice, 3 times, before I let myself believe it. The court had seen through the lies. The smug arrogance of my mother-in-law had faltered, and my husband's carefully orchestrated plan had cracked. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled fully. That evening, I cooked dinner for my children. The sound of their laughter filled the kitchen, the clatter of spoons against plates like music. It should have been ordinary, but it felt like victory. My son tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, do we have to go back to Grandma's house?" His eyes were wide, anxious. I knelt beside him. "No, sweetheart. This is your home. You're staying here with me." I kissed his forehead, trying to imprint the truth into him, to overwrite the poison his grandmother had whispered. My daughter climbed into my lap, wrapping her little arms around me. Their warmth anchored me. For this, I would fight until my last breath. But I knew better than to think it was over. Daniel's voice echoed in my head from our last meeting. They'll appeal. They won't give up easily. And sure enough, the next day, he called. They've already filed a motion to contest the ruling, he said. They're claiming you're emotionally unstable, that moving the children back was disruptive. I laughed bitterly. They disrupted everything. They stole them from me. I know, Daniel said, his tone calm. But remember, they'll twist the truth. That's why we have to stay meticulous. Every message, every word they've said to you, keep it. It all matters. So I did. I documented everything. The late-night texts from him that dripped with condescension, this will only get worse if you keep fighting. The smug, poisonous words from her, you'll regret this. Each one went into a folder labeled evidence. They thought intimidation would work. They thought I would crumble. Instead, they were giving me ammunition. At the next hearing, their lawyer was relentless. He painted me as angry, volatile, unfit. But Daniel countered every claim with precision. He produced messages, records, testimony. When I took the stand, I spoke with calm clarity. I told the judge the truth. That I loved my children. That I had never abandoned them. That I was fighting for their safety, not out of spite but out of necessity. When the ruling came again, it was final. Custody remained mine. The appeal was denied. My mother-in-law's face drained of color. My husband sat stone still, his hands gripping the table. Their empire of lies had collapsed in the eyes of the law. But even as I left the courtroom victorious, I knew they weren't finished. People like them never were. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of relief and vigilance. My children settled back into their routines, slowly untangling from the confusion their grandmother had sown. One evening, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she whispered, "Grandma said you didn't love Daddy anymore, and that's why she had to take us." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "Sweetheart, love doesn't mean letting someone hurt you. I will always love you. And I'll always keep you safe." She nodded sleepily, but I could see the doubt lingering. Undoing that kind of damage would take time. At night, when the house was quiet, I returned to the financial records. I couldn't shake the suspicion that there was more to this than custody. The missing money gnawed at me. I went back through months of statements, highlighting transfers I didn't recognize. One account appeared again and again, the same name I didn't know. My chest tightened. He had been moving money deliberately, carefully, long before he told me our marriage was over. I called Daniel. "There's more," I said. "He's been funneling money into an account I don't recognize. Thousands. Maybe more." There was a long pause on the line. When he spoke, his voice was sharper than usual. "If that's true, he could be looking at fraud. Bring me everything. Every statement, every note. We'll have a forensic accountant go through it." My pulse quickened. Fraud. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud. I gathered the papers into a stack, my hands trembling. It was one thing to fight for custody. It was another to realize he had been plotting for months, not just to take my children but to erase me financially. He hadn't underestimated me by accident. He had planned for a future without me. But he had overlooked one thing: I had kept records. Every detail. Every receipt. Every transfer. He thought he was clever. He thought I was blind. But I had been watching without even realizing it. And now, I had the key to unravel everything. A week later, Daniel called me into his office. His expression was grave. We've had our accountant look at the transfers. It's worse than we thought. He's not just moving money. He's tied up in questionable investments, shell companies, hidden accounts. If this goes to the authorities, he won't just lose money. He could face charges. I sat back in the chair, my heart pounding. For a moment, I felt almost dizzy. The man I had shared my life with, trusted with my future, had been weaving a web of lies so intricate it had taken years to see. And now, that web was unraveling. Not just in our marriage, not just in custody, but in the eyes of the law. What happens if we bring this forward? I asked. Daniel's gaze was steady. It could ruin him. Financially, legally, publicly. But you need to be sure this is the path you want to take. I thought of my children, of the nights I had cried into their empty beds, of the way his mother had sneered at me, certain of her control. I thought of the years I had bent and yielded, trying to fit into their world, only to be cast aside like I was nothing. And I thought of the email he had sent me, smug and cold, "The kids will be happier with my mother." My resolve crystallized. "I want to bring it forward," I said. My voice didn't shake. He took everything from me. Now it's his turn to lose. Daniel nodded. Then we'll proceed carefully. This won't be quick. And he won't sit quietly once he realizes what you're doing. He'll fight back. I left his office with the file clutched against my chest, my heart hammering. The war I thought I was fighting for custody had just grown bigger. This wasn't just about my children anymore. This was about exposing the truth. About making sure he and his mother never had the power to hurt us again. That night, as I sat alone at the kitchen table, my phone buzzed. A message from him. My stomach tightened as I opened it. "Are you really going to do this? You're making a mistake you can't undo." My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, the power wasn't his. It was mine. And soon, the world would see exactly who he really was. The first sign that the storm was coming didn't arrive in the form of a lawsuit or a subpoena. It came quietly, as whispers. I overheard it during school pickup, a fragment of conversation between two parents who didn't realize I was standing behind them. "Did you hear about Matthew Hale's business? Something about missing funds. They say he's being investigated." The words were hushed, but the shock in their voices was unmistakable. My heart skipped, not from fear, but from something far more dangerous, satisfaction. By the time I returned home, my phone was buzzing with messages. Old acquaintances. Distant relatives. Even mutual friends I hadn't heard from in years. They wanted to know if it was true. Had Matthew really been moving money into shell companies? Was he really under investigation? I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to. Their curiosity meant the cracks in his facade were finally showing. That evening, Daniel called. "The authorities are looking into the financial records we provided," he said. "They've opened a preliminary inquiry. If they find what we think they will, this could expand quickly." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. For months, I had been drowning in the fear of losing my children. Now, I could finally breathe. But I also knew my husband, ex-husband in every way that mattered. He wouldn't go quietly. He would thrash, fight, claw, until the very last thread of control slipped from his hands. And I was ready for it. The days blurred together, a whirlwind of court filings, accountant reports, and sleepless nights. I spent hours gathering documents, retracing transactions I had ignored for too long. Each piece of paper told a story, of deceit, of arrogance, of a man who thought he could weave a web tight enough to trap me forever. But the tighter his web had grown, the more obvious its weaknesses became. One night, after tucking the children into bed, I spread the files across the kitchen table. Bank statements. Receipts. Transfers. I traced the patterns with my finger. There was always a trail. Always a path back to the truth. My phone buzzed. It was my best friend. "How's it going?" she asked. I hesitated, glancing at the mountain of evidence. "It feels like I'm pulling a thread and watching an entire fabric unravel." She exhaled sharply. "Then keep pulling. Let it all fall apart." Her words gave me strength. I returned to the files, circling transactions, highlighting inconsistencies. He had been sloppy in his confidence, certain I would never look. But I was looking now, and I wouldn't stop. 2 weeks later, Daniel called me into his office again. His expression was more serious than I had ever seen. "It's official," he said. "The inquiry has become a full investigation. Fraud, tax evasion, possibly embezzlement. This goes deeper than we imagined." I stared at him, my pulse hammering. "What does that mean?" "It means," Daniel said, folding his hands on the desk, "that your husband could be facing charges. And if he does, everything he built could collapse." For a long moment, I sat frozen, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Charges. Collapse. I had wanted revenge, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. "And what about me?" I asked quietly. "You're protected," Daniel assured me. "You were cut out of his financial moves long ago. If anything, your cooperation strengthens your position. You've done nothing wrong." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by a surge of resolve. This was it. The reckoning. He had tried to erase me, to take my children, to strip me of everything. And now, the truth was turning against him. But the more the pressure built on him, the bolder his attempts became. Late one night, as I sat alone at the kitchen table, my phone buzzed again. His name on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You think this makes you strong?" His voice was low, almost broken. "You've ruined me." I stayed silent, letting him fill the air with his desperation. "You don't understand," he continued. "This will destroy everything. The business, the house, the reputation. Is that what you want? For our children to grow up knowing their father was a failure?" My grip on the phone tightened. "You did that to yourself," I said calmly. "You planned this. You took money that wasn't yours. You tried to erase me. Don't you dare pretend this is my doing." There was a long pause on the line. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "You'll regret this." I hung up, my heart racing. His threats no longer scared me, but they chilled me in another way. He was unraveling, and that made him dangerous. The next morning, I found something tucked under my front door. An envelope. No name, no address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Printed words, clipped and deliberate. "If you keep this up, you'll lose more than you think." I stared at the page, my pulse hammering. The message was clear. He was escalating. Fear prickled at the back of my neck, but beneath it, fury surged. He wanted me shaken. He wanted me silent. Instead, he had given me more evidence. I called Daniel immediately. "I found this under my door," I said, sending him a photo. His voice hardened. "Save it. This goes into the record. Every threat only strengthens your case." That night, as I watched my children sleep, I felt the dual weight of fear and determination. He was cornered now, and cornered men were unpredictable. But I refused to back down. Not when the truth was so close to breaking free. The next day, Daniel called again. His voice was urgent. "We need to meet. There's been a development. Something big." My stomach twisted. What happened? Just come, he said. You need to see this for yourself. I hung up, my mind racing. Development. Big. My heart pounded as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Because whatever this was, it was about to change everything. Daniel's office felt colder than usual when I walked in that morning. He was already seated at his desk, a thick folder spread open in front of him. His expression was tight, serious. My stomach sank. What is it? I asked, my voice barely steady. He gestured for me to sit. Our forensic accountant dug deeper into the transfers, he said. Much deeper. And what we found changes everything. He slid the folder toward me. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the pages. Numbers, account IDs, names of shell corporations that meant nothing to me. But then I saw it, one name repeated again and again, hidden behind layers of transfers. A name I recognized instantly. My mother-in-law. I froze, the air caught in my lungs. She's tied to this. Daniel nodded grimly. Not just tied. She's the beneficiary of several accounts. Matthew's been funneling money into companies where she's listed as a silent partner. This isn't just about him trying to cut you out. It's about the two of them working together. My vision blurred for a moment, rage and disbelief crashing over me in waves. She hadn't just stolen my children. She had been siphoning money behind my back, building a fortress for herself while I was kept in the dark. The betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. What does this mean legally? I asked, my voice sharp. It means, Daniel said, that both of them could face serious consequences. Fraud, conspiracy, tax evasion. If the authorities connect these dots, it won't just be Matthew under investigation. His mother could be dragged down with him. A dark satisfaction flickered inside me. For years, she had sat at the head of the table, dictating everything, undermining me at every turn, smiling with that smug superiority. And now, the mask was slipping. The empire she thought was untouchable was crumbling from the inside. But even as that satisfaction grew, fear crept in. If she realizes I know this, she'll panic, Daniel said. And panic makes people reckless. That's why you need to be careful. Don't confront her. Don't confront him. Let the investigation do its work. I nodded, though my hands clenched into fists. Not confronting them went against every instinct in my body. But I knew he was right. They wanted me reactive. They wanted me emotional. The smarter move was patience. When I left the office, the world outside felt sharper, more vivid. Every car horn, every passing face, every gust of wind pressed against my skin. I had ammunition now. Real, undeniable proof. But proof wasn't victory yet. Victory would come when their lies destroyed them from the inside. That night, after putting the children to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder open in front of me. My best friend came over, her presence a steady balm. She poured us both coffee and sat across from me. So it's true, she said softly, scanning the documents. They were in this together. I nodded, my throat tight. All this time, I thought she just wanted control of the kids. But she wanted everything. The money. The power. The legacy. And he gave it to her. Her eyes darkened. Then let her choke on it. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of it all pressing down. I traced the outlines of the numbers with my finger, each one a reminder of how blind I had been. But no more. The next morning, the fallout began. Whispers spread faster, louder. A colleague of Matthew's called me, his voice low. I don't know what you've done, but people are talking. Clients are pulling out. Investors are panicking. He's losing everything. I didn't answer, but inside, I felt the shift. His carefully constructed image was collapsing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. That evening, as I was putting away dishes, a knock sounded at the door. My stomach clenched. When I opened it, Matthew stood there. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, his arrogance cracked. For the first time, he looked desperate. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. I crossed my arms. "About what? How you stole money with your mother? Or how you tried to erase me from our children's lives?" His jaw tightened. "You don't understand. This has gone too far. If this continues, she'll go down too. Do you want that?" I let out a sharp laugh. "Do I want that? She took my children. She poisoned them against me. She helped you strip me of everything. If she goes down, it will be the first real justice I've seen in years." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "If she falls, she'll drag you with her. Don't think she won't. She'll twist this, make it look like you were involved. She'll do whatever it takes to survive." A flicker of fear rippled through me, but I didn't show it. "Then let her try. I have the truth on my side." "What do you have?" He didn't answer. His silence told me everything. He had nothing left. And that terrified him. I closed the door on him, my hands trembling. For a moment, I leaned against it, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading away. Relief washed through me, but it was quickly replaced by unease. His warning echoed in my head. "She'll drag you with her. She'll do whatever it takes." That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak of the house. My children slept peacefully in the next room, their soft breathing a reminder of what was truly at stake. But beneath that peace, a gnawing fear grew. If my mother-in-law realized how much I knew, what would she do? The answer came sooner than I expected. The next morning, as I poured cereal for my children, my phone buzzed. A new message. From her. "You think you've won. You think you're safe. But you've made the biggest mistake of your life." I stared at the words, my blood running cold. She knew. Or at least, she suspected. The walls were closing in, not just around him, but around her too. And now, the war wasn't just about custody or money. It was about survival. Her message haunted me all morning. "You've made the biggest mistake of your life." I kept rereading it, searching for hidden meanings, for some clue about what she was planning. But there was no need for guesswork. When it came to my mother-in-law, her intentions were always the same: control. She had lost it once, and now she was clawing desperately to get it back. By noon, I had my answer. Daniel called, his voice clipped and urgent. "They filed a motion," he said. "She's accusing you of emotional instability and claiming you've been manipulating the children against their father. They want an emergency hearing." The room spun for a moment. "What? That's absurd. I've done nothing but try to protect them." "I know," Daniel said firmly. "But listen to me. They don't need truth to win. They need doubt. That's all. If they can make you look unstable, even for a moment, they can try to claw back custody. That's her game." I pressed my hand against my forehead, the weight of it all pressing down. "So what do we do?" "We fight it," he said. "We'll present the threats, the messages, the evidence of her interference. But you need to prepare yourself. This won't be pretty." The next few days were a blur of preparation. I dug through my folders, pulling out every message she had ever sent me, the insults disguised as concern, the manipulative little digs, the outright threats. Each one went into the growing pile of evidence. My best friend stayed with me, watching the kids, making sure I ate, reminding me to breathe. But even her steady presence couldn't shake the gnawing fear inside me. I knew how convincing my mother-in-law could be when she wanted. She had perfected the role of the dignified matriarch, the benevolent grandmother. Behind closed doors, she was venom. In public, she was sugar. The day of the hearing arrived, and as I walked into the courthouse, my heart thudded so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. They were already there, sitting side by side at the table, the picture of unity. She wore a navy suit, pearls at her throat, her expression calm and composed. My husband looked worn but determined, his jaw set as if he believed this was their last chance to win. Their lawyer rose smoothly and began the attack. Your Honor, the children are being subjected to an unstable environment. Our clients are deeply concerned for their well-being. Mrs. Hale has displayed erratic behavior, lashing out, sending hostile messages, and attempting to alienate the children from their father and grandmother. This is not the behavior of a stable caregiver. My hands clenched into fists under the table. Lies. All lies. But the way he said it, so polished, so confident, made it sound plausible. I glanced at the judge, searching for any sign of belief. Their lawyer continued, pulling out printed screenshots, selective, cropped, stripped of context. My stomach twisted as I recognized them. My own words, twisted into weapons. Words I had written in moments of rage, moments of pain, now being used to paint me as unfit. Daniel rose calmly. Your Honor, what you see before you are fragments of conversations, deliberately edited to misrepresent the petitioner. We have the full context here. He placed a thick binder on the table. Messages from the grandmother threatening my client, warning her to stop fighting or regret it. Emails from the husband attempting to intimidate her into silence. Financial records proving deliberate deception. This is not the story of an unstable mother. This is the story of a woman being systematically undermined by her husband and his mother. He handed the binder to the judge. My breath steadied as the pages turned, each one a piece of the truth. When Daniel called me to the stand, I spoke plainly, honestly. I admitted my fear, my anger, but I made it clear, every decision I have made has been to protect my children. They were taken from me without consent. They were told lies about me. I will not let that stand. The room was silent when I finished. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in the judge's eyes, a glimmer of understanding. But I knew better than to hope too soon. Hours passed in a blur of arguments and testimony. Finally, the judge spoke. I will review the evidence carefully before making a decision. For now, custody remains with the petitioner until a ruling is finalized. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat. A stalemate. My mother-in-law's face barely shifted, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She wasn't used to losing. She wasn't used to being challenged. As I left the courtroom, she leaned close, her voice low enough only for me to hear. You think you're clever. But you don't know how far I'm willing to go. I froze, her words dripping with menace. Before I could respond, she turned away, her pearls catching the light as she walked out with her son at her side. My skin crawled. I knew that tone. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. That night, after putting the children to bed, I sat in the darkened living room, the silence heavy around me. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. My chest tightened as I opened it. A single photo appeared on the screen. My children. Taken from a distance, at their school playground earlier that day. My blood turned to ice. Whoever had taken that photo wanted me to know I was being watched. Wanted me to feel powerless. Wanted me to fear. I dropped the phone onto the table, my hands trembling. This was no longer just about custody. This was no longer just about money. They were escalating. And I realized, with a chilling certainty, that the battle was about to reach a level I had never imagined. I couldn't move. The image of my children on the playground burned into my mind, their small figures frozen on my phone screen. At first glance, the picture might have looked innocent, but to me it was a blade pressed against my throat. Someone had been there, close enough to capture the moment, close enough to prove they could get near my children whenever they wanted. The message was clear: we are watching. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Fear could paralyze me, or it could ignite me. I chose the latter. With shaking hands, I forwarded the photo to Daniel along with the unknown number it came from. Within minutes, my phone rang. His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard. Do not ignore this. We need to involve the authorities immediately. This isn't just intimidation, it borders on harassment, maybe even stalking. Do you think it was her? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Who else? He said grimly. She knows she's losing in court. This is desperation. But desperation makes her dangerous. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Dangerous was exactly what she was. But if she thought she could scare me back into submission, she was wrong. I wasn't the same woman she had silenced for years. I was done being afraid. The next day, I went to the police station with Daniel by my side. Filing the report was surreal. I handed over the photo, the number, the threats. The officer nodded solemnly, promising to look into it. But I saw the skepticism in his eyes. To him, this was just another family feud, messy but ordinary. He didn't see the shadow of menace that hung over every word, every action. He didn't know her like I did. On the drive home, Daniel spoke quietly. She's trying to make you feel hunted. Don't give her that satisfaction. Document everything. If this escalates, and I suspect it will, we'll have the proof we need. I clutched the folder in my lap. Proof. That had become my armor. Every message, every photo, every twisted attempt at intimidation. They thought evidence would be my weakness, that my words and actions could be turned against me. But evidence had become my weapon, the very thing that would undo them. That night, I tucked my children into bed with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. They were safe, but for how long? I lay awake listening for every creak of the house, every car that slowed on the street. My body was exhausted, but my mind was a battlefield. Fear whispered that I was outmatched, that they would stop at nothing. But rage reminded me of something stronger. I had already survived everything they had thrown at me. I wasn't backing down now. 2 days later, my suspicions were confirmed. As I picked up my daughter from ballet practice, I noticed a car idling across the street. A black sedan, tinted windows. It was still there when I left. It turned when I turned. My pulse quickened. I made a split-second decision and pulled into a crowded shopping plaza instead of going home. I parked, hard hammering, and watched in my rearview mirror. The sedan circled once, then drove away. That night, I told Daniel. His expression darkened. We'll add it to the report. But this is exactly what she wants, to rattle you. Don't let her. Every step she takes digs her deeper. But I couldn't shake the image of that car. I couldn't shake the thought of my children being followed, photographed, stalked. My fury sharpened into something new, resolve. If she wanted to play this game, I would play it better. I reached out to a private investigator the next morning. A former detective recommended by a friend of Daniel's. His handshake was firm, his eyes steady. You want me to follow her, he said simply, not even asking why. I nodded. I want everything. Where she goes. Who she meets. Every lie she hides behind. If she thinks she can haunt me, I'll haunt her right back. Within a week, the investigator delivered his first report. I opened the envelope at my kitchen table, my hands trembling. Inside were photographs. My mother-in-law, leaving a bank. Meeting with a man I didn't recognize. Entering an office that bore the name of one of the shell companies Daniel had uncovered. My heart raced. She wasn't just hiding behind Matthew. She was neck-deep in the very fraud that was now threatening to consume them both. I felt a grim smile tug at my lips. She thought she was untouchable, the puppet master behind the scenes. But now I had proof. Proof that her hands were just as dirty as his. That night, I sat in the dark with the photos spread out before me, my children asleep upstairs. My best friend sat across from me, her eyes wide as she studied the images. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the nail in her coffin." I nodded slowly. Not yet. But soon. The phone buzzed, cutting through the silence. A new message, from that same unknown number. My stomach clenched as I opened it. This time, it wasn't a photo of my children. It was a photo of me, taken that afternoon, leaving the courthouse with Daniel. The caption was simple. "We see you." The room tilted for a moment. My friend reached across the table, gripping my hand. "She's trying to break you," she said fiercely. "Don't let her." I swallowed hard, steadying myself. They were watching me. But I was watching them too. And when the truth came out, they wouldn't just lose. They would shatter. I gathered the photos into a neat stack, my hands no longer trembling. If they wanted a war, they had one. The difference was, I wasn't fighting for pride or power. I was fighting for my children, for my freedom, for justice. And justice was closing in. But as I slid the latest thread into my folder of evidence, I didn't know yet that the next move they made wouldn't just target me, it would strike at the very heart of the life I was trying to rebuild. I should have known they wouldn't stop at threats. Still, when the attack finally came, it blindsided me. It was a Tuesday morning, crisp and bright, the kind of day that should have felt ordinary. I had just dropped my children at school and was pulling into the driveway when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number again. My chest tightened as I opened it. This time, it wasn't a photo. It was a headline. Local mother investigated for child neglect. The article was a smear, a grotesque distortion of my life. Grainy photos of me looking tired, carrying laundry, walking alone. Lines pulled from anonymous sources claiming I left my children unattended, that I was emotionally unstable, that I had screamed at them in public. Lies stacked on lies, spun into something poisonous. And at the very bottom, a single line, family members declined to comment. I sank onto the steps of my porch, the phone trembling in my hands. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was a public execution of my reputation. If the article spread, my children would see it. Their teachers. Their friends' parents. The poison would seep into every corner of our lives. I called Daniel immediately, my voice raw. "They planted a story. It's everywhere." "I've seen it," he said, his tone clipped. "It's already circulating. But listen to me, smear tactics don't hold up in court. Judges see through this kind of thing. That doesn't matter." I snapped. "My children will see it. Everyone will. They're trying to destroy me." There was a pause on the line, then Daniel's voice softened. "I know. And that's exactly why we're going to turn it back on them. We'll find out who leaked this. And when we do, it'll prove their desperation." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold on to that steady calm he carried. But all I felt was the weight of humiliation pressing down on me. I stayed on the porch long after the call ended, staring at the phone screen, the ugly words blurring before my eyes. My neighbors passed by, their smiles a little too tight, their eyes lingering a little too long. I could almost hear their whispers. That evening, as I picked up my children from school, I saw the doubt etched in their teacher's face. She avoided my eyes, her usual warmth replaced by a cool professionalism. My son clutched my hand, confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere. My daughter asked quietly, "Mommy, why are people saying you're not nice to us?" The question cracked me open. I crouched down, looking into her wide, frightened eyes. "Sweetheart, people say things that aren't true when they're trying to hurt someone. But you know me. You know I love you. That's what matters." She nodded, but I saw the uncertainty lingering. And that broke me more than the article ever could. When we got home, my best friend was waiting. She pulled me into a fierce hug before I could speak. "I saw it," she said. "Don't you dare let them win. This isn't the truth. It's their last weapon, shame." I buried my face in her shoulder, the tears finally breaking free. For days, I had held them back. But now, I let them fall. "What if people believe it?" I whispered. "What if my children believe it?" "They won't," she said firmly. "Because you'll show them the truth. Every single day." Her words steadied me, but the fire inside was still flickering dangerously low. For the first time since this began, I felt the edges of defeat pressing in. They had stolen my children once. Now, they were trying to steal my name, my very identity. And the worst part was that it was working. 2 days later, Daniel called again. "We traced the leak," he said. "The so-called journalist. He's a family acquaintance. Paid under the table. Guess by who?" I didn't need to guess. My stomach clenched. "Her." "Yes," Daniel said. "Your mother-in-law orchestrated this. And we have proof. Bank transfers to the writer, phone records. It's all there." A cold rush of satisfaction surged through me. Proof. Evidence. The very thing she thought she could wield against me had become her downfall. "Can we use it?" I asked. "Absolutely," he said. "It will demolish her credibility in court. But there's more. The investigator you hired, he's uncovered meetings between her and several of Matthew's business associates. She's not just involved. She's leading some of the financial schemes. She's exposed now." I sat back, my mind spinning. For weeks, I had been fighting just to keep my head above water. But now, for the first time, the tide was shifting. I had them cornered. Not just Matthew, but her too. Their empire of lies was collapsing. That night, I tucked my children into bed, their questions still lingering but their trust slowly returning. I kissed their foreheads and whispered, "We're almost through this. I promise." But even as I said the words, a knock at the door made my blood run cold. It was late, far too late for visitors. I crept to the door, my heart pounding, and peered through the peephole. My breath caught. She was standing there. My mother-in-law. Alone. Calm. Smiling. I didn't open the door. I didn't move. I just watched as she leaned close to the doorframe, her voice carrying through the wood. "We need to talk. Or else." Then she slipped a small envelope under the door and walked away into the night, her figure swallowed by the shadows. My hands trembled as I picked up the envelope, staring at it like it might explode. Inside, I could already feel the weight of her next move. And I knew, as much as I wanted to delay, that opening it would change everything. The envelope sat heavy in my hands, as if it carried the weight of every threat, every manipulation, every wound she had inflicted on me. My fingers trembled as I tore it open, the paper ripping louder than it should have. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A contract. Typed, stamped, signed. It was a statement of guardianship. She had filled it out herself, a grotesque piece of fiction declaring that my children were better off in her care. My husband's signature was scrawled across the bottom, as though he had already agreed. The message was clear: surrender, or she would make this her new reality. She thought intimidation on paper would scare me into submission. She thought she could still dictate my life with a signature. I laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh that startled even me. Because she didn't understand. I wasn't the woman she had manipulated into silence anymore. I wasn't the wife who had bent and yielded, hoping for acceptance. I was the woman who had already ripped their empire apart piece by piece. And this flimsy sheet of paper was nothing compared to what I held in my hands. The next morning, I walked into Daniel's office with the envelope. His eyes scanned the page, his expression tightening. "This is fraudulent," he said. "Completely illegal. If she tries to use this in court, it will backfire spectacularly. We'll add it to the file. It's another nail in her coffin." I nodded, my voice steady. "Then let's bury her with it." The hearing came faster than I expected. By then, the investigation into Matthew's finances was in full swing. Whispers had become headlines. Investors had pulled out. His company teetered on collapse. And now, with the fraudulent guardianship document exposed, his mother's credibility shattered alongside his. As I entered the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Matthew sat slumped at the table, his face drawn, his suit rumpled. My mother-in-law, however, still carried herself with that familiar arrogance. Pearls at her throat, eyes cold and sharp. She thought she could bluff her way through, as she always had. But when the judge held up the fraudulent document, her mask slipped for the first time. "This is a serious matter," the judge said, his voice cutting through the room. "Fraudulent documentation regarding custody will not be tolerated. Combined with the financial evidence presented, this court sees a pattern of manipulation and deceit." My mother-in-law shifted in her seat, her lips parting in protest. But no words came. For once, she had nothing. Daniel rose, his voice calm and steady. "Your Honor, this is not the story of a mother unfit to raise her children. This is the story of a woman who has endured calculated attacks by her husband and his mother, designed to strip her of her rights, her reputation, and her dignity. But she has stood firm. And the evidence before you speaks for itself." I sat straighter, my children's faces flashing in my mind. Their laughter, their tears, their trust. This was why I had fought. This was why I hadn't broken, no matter how close I'd come. The judge's ruling was swift and final. Custody remained mine, undisputed. My husband's financial dealings were officially referred for prosecution. And as for my mother-in-law, her fraudulent attempt at guardianship was recorded as evidence of her unfitness to have any legal influence over my children. The gavel fell with a crack that echoed like thunder. It was over. When we left the courthouse, the reporters swarmed. Questions flew through the air like arrows, microphones thrust forward. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The story was already writing itself. Matthew Hale, once respected businessman, under investigation for fraud. His mother, exposed as complicit. And me, the woman they had tried to erase, walking out with my children at my side. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on the porch with my children curled against me. Their small bodies were warm, their breathing steady. For the first time in months, peace settled over me. My best friend joined us, a quiet smile on her face. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. We did it. Every lie they told, every weapon they used, it only made me stronger. The days that followed were a blur of fallout. Matthew's company collapsed, his reputation destroyed. The investigation widened, pulling in associates, investors, and yes, his mother. Her name appeared in headline after headline, her once untouchable image now synonymous with fraud and manipulation. The empire they had built on lies was reduced to rubble. One evening, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Matthew standing there. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. "You've ruined me," he whispered. I studied him for a long moment, then spoke quietly. "No. You ruined yourself. I just refuse to let you take me down with you." His lips parted as if to argue, but nothing came. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the night, his footsteps fading like the last echoes of a storm. I shut the door, a finality settling deep in my bones. That chapter of my life was closed. Later, as I tucked my children into bed, my daughter looked up at me with sleepy eyes. "Are we safe now, Mommy?" she asked. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, pressing a kiss there. "Yes, sweetheart. We're safe. And we always will be." As I watched them drift to sleep, I realized something profound. Revenge hadn't just been about destroying them. It had been about reclaiming myself. About proving, to them and to me, that I was stronger than the chains they tried to bind me with. They had underestimated me. And in the end, that had been their undoing. The night was quiet, the house filled with the steady rhythm of my children's breathing. For the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe too. Free. Whole. Untouchable. Their empire had fallen. And I was still standing.